Jesus' warning against vain repetitions, Matthew 6:7. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned a quiet superstition that a prayer only counts if it is long. We stretch sentences, repeat phrases, and fill the silence, afraid that God might miss us if we do not keep talking. We have heard strong prayers in public, and we copy the style at home, half asleep. So prayer becomes a performance with a timer, not a meeting with a father. And the longer it goes, the safer we feel. But safety is not the same as faith, and noise is not the same as nearness. In Jesus' teaching, he warns his followers not to pile up empty words as if volume creates power. He points to the way pagans try to persuade their gods with many phrases like coins poured onto a table. The shock is simple. Jesus does not praise the marathon, he exposes the fear underneath it. He also shows that God is not hard of hearing and he is not moved by verbal pressure. When prayer turns into babbling, it is not devotion, it is panic wearing religious clothing, and panic always wants more words. This is where the message gets twisted. Some hear "don't repeat" and assume all set prayers are wrong. Others hear it and decide long prayers are wrong. But Jesus is not attacking length, and he is not banning structure. He is attacking emptiness. A heart can repeat a sentence with love or repeat it like a machine. The danger is the formula that replaces attention, the words that hide the soul. If you can say a lot and never be truthful, then prayer becomes camouflage in plain sight, often. So the real question is not, how long did you pray? It is, were you honest? A short prayer can be a clean doorway into God's presence, while an hour can be a locked room full of smoke. Jesus is pulling us away from spiritual theater and toward spiritual truth. He is inviting the anxious person to stop bargaining and start trusting. He is inviting the proud person to stop performing and start listening, even for a few seconds. And that invitation still stands tonight, steady, quiet, and firm. Praying in secret versus public religious performance. Matthew 6:5-6. Picture a prayer that is meant to be heard. The voice is steady, the words are polished, and the pauses are timed like music. People nod. Someone whispers, "Powerful." But Jesus looks past the sound and asks a harsher question. Who is the audience? Because a prayer can be aimed at God and still be fueled by the hunger to be seen. In that moment, the room becomes a stage, and the heart becomes an actor. You can feel it, even if nobody says it. That is how something holy becomes a mirror. In Matthew 6, Jesus describes people who love to pray where they will be noticed. Their reward, he says, is exactly what they wanted: human attention. Then he offers a quieter path. Go where nobody claps, close the door, and speak to your Father who is unseen. This is not about hating public prayer. It is about removing the stage. When the crowd is gone, the soul has nowhere to act, so the truth finally shows up. And the truth is often small and plain and trembling, and masks slip. We often do this without realizing it. Even alone, we can pray like we are still being graded. We use church words we never use anywhere else. We try to sound strong when we feel weak. We rush to thank God before we admit we are scared. We add long introductions to avoid saying the one thing that hurts. We keep talking so we do not have to listen. The secret place exposes all of that. It asks for truth, not tone. And in that small room, short, honest prayers suddenly make sense. Because when nobody is watching, you do not need a 1-hour formula. You can simply say what is real. Help me, forgive me, stay with me. Jesus is not shrinking prayer, he is cleaning it. He is teaching us that the Father is not impressed by volume, but he is moved by sincerity. And when you pray this way, you may notice your life becomes less noisy too. The parable of the Pharisee and the publican. Luke 18:9-14. Two men walk into the same holy space and both speak to God. One sounds confident, the other can barely lift his head. If you were judging by tone, you might guess the first man is closer to heaven. But Jesus tells this story because our instincts are often wrong. Sometimes the most religious-sounding prayer is the least connected one. Sometimes the loudest prayer is the loneliest prayer. And sometimes the shortest prayer in the room is the one that breaks through. It is a story that makes the room go quiet. Jesus describes a Pharisee who thanks God that he is not like other people, and a tax collector who stands at a distance asking for mercy. The contrast is sharp, almost uncomfortable. One man uses prayer to announce his goodness, the other uses prayer to confess his need. Then comes the verdict. Jesus says the humble man goes home justified, not the man who performed his righteousness. The story is meant to unsettle us because it sounds like church, but it reveals a trap for the religious mind, for us. This is not a story about vocabulary. It is a story about posture. The Pharisee's prayer is crowded with himself. The publican's prayer has one focus: God's mercy. Ritual can do the same damage when it turns prayer into a self-report. We can stack spiritual achievements into our sentences, hoping God will agree we are fine. We can even confess in a way that still protects our pride. But prayer is not where we prove we are okay. Prayer is where we admit we are not alone. If you want a prayer that changes you, start where the tax collector started. No posing, no cover story, no religious polish. Short, honest prayers do not impress a crowd, but they can rescue a soul. And long prayers are not evil unless they become a place to hide from God with God talk. Jesus ends the parable like a warning light. Humility goes up, pride comes down every time. When you see yourself clearly, you stop using prayer as a trophy case, and you start asking for mercy. Right now. God already knows your needs. Matthew 6:8. Here is the fear behind the formula. If I do not explain it right, God will not act. So we repeat details. We rehearse the same request with new adjectives. We pray like we are submitting paperwork, and we are terrified it will be rejected. But Jesus steps into that fear and says something that should change the whole mood of prayer. Before you ask, your Father already knows what you need. That means prayer is not a briefing. It is a bond, and a return to trust, not a test. This is not God being distant. It is God being attentive. He is not learning facts when you speak. He is receiving you. Jesus is pulling us away from the idea that prayer is a lever you pull until heaven moves. If God already knows, then frantic repetition is exposed for what it is, an attempt to control the outcome. And when control becomes the goal, love stops being the engine. Prayer becomes tense, and tension makes us talk more, not less, until we are exhausted, down to a whisper. This truth can be misunderstood in two directions. One says, if God knows, I don't need to pray. The other says, if God knows, I must pray perfectly. Both miss the point. Jesus is teaching trust. You pray because you are a child speaking to a father, not a customer negotiating with a seller. Your honesty matters more than your eloquence. Your need can be stated in a sentence, and heaven will not mishear it. Prayer is still asking, but it is also surrender and learning to rest daily. So instead of building a 1-hour wall of words, try opening a door. Name the need, name the fear. Ask for what is right, then stop and breathe because the Father is not confused by your imperfect phrasing. Prayer becomes lighter when you believe you are already known. Sit with that for 10 seconds and let the silence be faith, not failure. If you have ever felt pressure to get it right, tell me in the comments what that pressure has sounded like in your mind, especially when you were already tired. The Lord's Prayer as a model of brief, sincere prayer. After warning against empty repetition, Jesus does not leave a blank space. He gives a pattern. It is short enough to memorize, but deep enough to spend a lifetime on. And that is the point. Prayer is not measured by minutes, it is measured by meaning. Jesus begins with Father, which is a relational word, not a ritual word. Right away, prayer stops being a speech and becomes a family conversation. It is simple, but it is not shallow. It starts with God, not with our panic. At the start, look at the shape of it. God's name and kingdom come first, then daily bread, forgiveness, and protection for today. No flattery marathon, no panic pile of details, just clear, honest needs placed under a bigger trust. This prayer can be spoken in under a minute, and yet it holds worship, surrender, dependence, repentance, and hope. The economy of it is intentional. Jesus shows that brevity can still be complete. When you pray it slowly, each line opens a door. It gives you words when your own words fail. But here is the danger. The Lord's Prayer can be used as a charm. We can recite it fast, without listening, without thinking, without faith. That turns a gift into a formula. The same words that can open the heart can also become a mask. Jesus did not hand us a magic script. He handed us rails. He gave us a way to pray when we are tired or scared or unsure what to say without pretending we are fine. And rails only help if you stay on them. If you want to pray short and honest, take this pattern and make it personal. Father becomes, I'm here. Give us becomes, I need help today. Forgive becomes, I was wrong. Keep it simple. Keep it real. The goal is not to sound spiritual. The goal is to be with God. And when prayer becomes presence, even a few words can carry more weight than 1,000. In a world full of noise, this kind of prayer feels like clean air. It can hold you when you cannot hold yourself. Quality over quantity, sincerity over word count. There is a quiet lie that floats through church culture. More time equals more holiness. So we rank ourselves by hours, not by honesty. We think God is like a boss who checks the time card, and when we cannot keep up, we feel guilty or fake. Some of us start copying the long prayers we hear even when our hearts are empty. But God is not measuring minutes like a machine. He searches hearts. That means a small prayer can be true and a big prayer can be hollow, all in the same day. Quality shows up as clarity. It is the difference between Lord, bless everyone, and Lord, help my friend who is breaking. It is the difference between I'm fine and I'm not okay. This is not about making prayer small. It is about making prayer real. When you stop trying to impress heaven, you start noticing your own soul. You hear what you actually fear. You see what you actually want. And then you can bring it into the light without pretending. Sometimes the most spiritual thing is to stop hiding. Quantity has its place. Jesus prayed for long stretches. The Psalms are full of extended cries. Length can be love, but length without love becomes ritual. Hours can become hiding. Some people use long prayers to avoid obedience, to avoid confession, to avoid simple trust. A 1-hour formula can be a way to stay busy with God while staying distant from God. That is why short, honest prayers can be a rescue rope. They cut through the fog and name what matters. They also make room for real change. So tonight, try a different metric. Ask, did I mean what I said? Ask, did I tell the truth? If you have 30 seconds, give God 30 honest seconds. If you have an hour, give God an honest hour. Either way, let sincerity be the proof of life. If you feel numb, say that. If you feel ashamed, say that. And if you want, leave a calm note in the comments with one sentence you can pray when you have no strength left, so someone else can quietly borrow it. Formalism in prayer. When ritual replaces real connection, it usually does not start as hypocrisy. It starts as survival. You learn the right words, you learn the right pace, you learn what sounds reverent. Over time, the habit feels safer than honesty. You can pray for an hour and never risk being known, not by people and not even by God. The scary part is how normal it can feel. A ritual can keep you busy while your heart stays untouched, and you may not notice until you are already tired. Formalism is when the outside stays active but the inside goes quiet. It can look like strict adherence to rules and rituals while real spiritual engagement fades. One definition calls it external compliance that can hinder genuine connection and harden the heart toward the gospel. That is why 1-hour formulas can feel powerful but leave you unchanged. The routine becomes the proof instead of love being the proof. And you can confuse discipline with closeness because they can look similar from far away. This is the distortion. You start trusting the method more than the God you are praying to. You think, if I say it the same way every time, I will be safe. You think, if I pray longer, I will be heard. But formalism quietly trains the soul to hide. It can even make you impatient with simple prayer, like plain words are not spiritual enough. Yet the Bible keeps pointing the other direction, not toward impressive patterns, but toward honest hearts and clean motives. If you feel this in yourself, do not panic. Just tell the truth. You can say, God, I have been going through the motions. That one sentence can be more real than 60 minutes of religious noise. Ritual is not always wrong, but ritual without attention becomes a wall. And the longer you lean on the wall, the harder it is to hear your own heart. Tonight, do not build a wall. Open a window and let sincerity back in. Prayer as relationship and conversation, not ritual or formula. A formula feels strong because it is predictable, and fear loves predictability. But relationships are not built by scripts. You cannot build friendship by repeating the same speech, and you cannot build closeness with God that way either. Real prayer has tone shifts. It has pauses. It has awkward honesty. It has moments where you do not know what to say, and you still stay. A relationship is not a performance. It is presence, even when you feel small. Jesus talked about prayer like something personal, not like something theatrical. He warned against praying to be seen, and he pulled his listeners toward the Father who sees in secret. That secret place is relational. It is where you stop managing your image. It is where you speak like a child, not like a public speaker. And suddenly, short, honest prayers are not lazy. They are normal. They sound like real life because they come from real life. Here is the misuse. We can treat God like a machine, insert the right words, pull the right lever, wait for a result. When nothing changes, we try again, louder, longer, with more spiritual vocabulary. But relationships do not work like that. A good father is not moved by fancy wording. He is moved by truth. He listens for the heart, not the polish. When prayer becomes conversation, you stop trying to control God, and you start letting God shape you. So try this tonight. Speak plainly. Say one true sentence. Then be quiet long enough to mean it. You are not trying to impress heaven. You are learning to be with God in the dark without props. And if you fall back into formulas, do not quit. Just come back to honesty again. If you want, share in the comments one simple sentence that helps you talk to God like a father. The heart over the formula. God desires truth in the inward being. Psalm 51:6. Some prayers are long because they are honest, and some are long because they are hiding. That is what makes this uncomfortable. You can use religious words like curtains. You can decorate your fear. You can cover your guilt with spiritual noise. But there is a line in Psalm 51 that cuts through the decorations. It points to the place you cannot polish, the inside. It tells you where God is looking, and it is not at your performance. It is at your truth. Deep down, Psalm 51:6 says God desires truth in the inward being, in the hidden part where nobody else can see. That is why this psalm is not a show, it is a confession. It is the voice of someone admitting, I cannot fix this with appearances. And that is the shift your prayer life may need. Not longer, truer. Not louder, cleaner. The Bible is not pushing you toward fancy prayers. It is pulling you toward honest ones, even if they come out broken. This can be distorted too. Some people hear inward truth and start obsessing over feelings, like you must sound emotional to be sincere. Others hear it and think God only wants guilt. But Psalm 51 is not worshiping shame. It is rejecting pretending. It is the end of the double life. It is the moment the mouth stops protecting the image and the heart steps into the light. That is why short, honest prayers can be powerful, because they stop negotiating with God and start confessing to God. So do not fear the simple prayer, God, I was wrong. That is inward truth. God, I am scared. That is inward truth. God, I need wisdom. That is inward truth. And this kind of truth does not make you smaller. It makes you reachable. If Psalm 51, feels too close, you can say that plainly and tell me in the comments what part of honesty is hardest for you to bring into prayer. Short, spontaneous arrow prayers versus scheduled religious recitation. There is a kind of prayer that does not need perfect timing. It fits inside ordinary life. It happens in hallways, in traffic, at the sink, on the edge of sleep. The old writers sometimes called them arrow prayers. Quick prayers shot toward God when the moment is sharp. They are not poetry. They are not speeches. They are often only a few words long, but they are honest, and they keep the relationship alive. They are small sparks in a long night. The idea shows up in Christian tradition as deliberately short prayers for personal devotion meant to be frequent and sincere. Some accounts connect this habit to early Christian spiritual practice and the roots of brief prayers like the Jesus prayer. The point is not to replace deeper prayer times. The point is to stop acting like God is only available at scheduled hours. When you pray short all day, you are practicing nearness. You are building reflexes of trust. Of course, this can be misused. A person can use quick prayers as an excuse to never slow down. You can fire off a sentence and call it faith while avoiding silence, scripture, and change. That is not what this is. Arrow prayers are not a way to stay shallow. They are a way to stay connected. They are what you do when the day is heavy and you need help right now. They keep you from drifting into autopilot. They remind you that God is present in the middle of the moment. So choose a few honest arrows. Guide me. Have mercy. Give me patience. Keep me from sin. Then say them when you need them, not when it looks impressive. And if you also have time for longer prayer, let it be real, not forced. The goal is not to reduce prayer into slogans. The goal is to live with an open line to the Father. And sometimes the most courageous prayer is the shortest one, whispered before you break. In the end, the length of a prayer is not the measure of its life. The measure is honesty and the direction of the heart. If you have been trapped in formulas, you can step out without losing faith. You are not quitting prayer. You are removing the mask. You are choosing relationship over performance, trust over pressure, truth over noise. And even tonight, in a quiet room, a few real words can be enough to begin again. If you like our content, consider subscribing. Or some topics didn't made in the list or topics that you want us to feature, please leave in the comments. Let the last sound in the room be sincerity, not panic, not pretending.